Cuba Libre is a 1 to 4 player game that recreates insurgency and counterinsurgency in Cuba from 1957 to 1958, and it is the second volume in GMT's Coin series. Cuba Libre was designed by Jeff Grossman and Volko Ruhnke, the creator of the Coin system. GMT has already produced 9 titles in the Coin series, with many others currently in development and earmarked for publication. Since 2012, the Coin series has remained very popular, and its system is unique. And Cuba Libre, which has the smallest footprint of all the Coin games, is widely regarded as the logical entry point for anyone interested in learning the system's core rules and mechanics. And it is with this purpose in mind that we will be setting up the game and going through the extended example of play found in the game's playbook. If you have the game, feel free to set it up and play along. And if you don't have the game, just sit back and watch. This video will place the game right in front of you. In Cuba Libre, each player manages the fate of one of 4 distinct factions. The blue pieces represent the Cuban government and its president, Fulgencio Batista. The red pieces are those of the leftist July 26 movement, M26 for short, headed by Fidel Castro. The yellow game pieces represent the Directorio Revolucionario, an organization of anti-Batista university students. Finally, the green pieces represent the Syndicate. These are organized crime elements which controlled gambling and casino operations in Cuba. Now, let's set up the game. Setup instructions are located in the back of the rulebook. We place the aid counter in the number 15 box of the track that runs around the edge of the game board. We place the government and syndicate cylinders in the number 15 space of the track, and a cylinder for M26 space number 10, and the Directorio cylinder in space 5. We place the total support marker in space 16, and we place the opposition and basis marker in the number 7 space. We place the open casino markers in space 3, and the Directorio population plus basis marker in space 1. We place the US Alliance marker in the firm box of the US Alliance display. We place 4 green cash markers into the circle spaces of the green cash box. Any other cash markers are spares and not used in the game. We place the remaining 4 large cylinders, these are eligibility cylinders, in the eligible box of the sequence of play display. We place active support counters into the neutral boxes with a dark blue symbol, and passive support markers in those with light blue. passive opposition markers in those spaces with a pink symbol, and active opposition markers in neutral box spaces with a red symbol. So here you can see that Sierra Maestra is a mountainous province and it begins in active opposition. Oriente is a forested province that begins in passive opposition to the government. And the city of Santiago de Cuba begins neutral. Here we see the forested province of Camagüey begins in passive opposition. Meanwhile, the city of Camagüey begins in passive support to the government. And the province of Las Villas begins neutral. Matanzas, which is a grassland province, begins in passive opposition to the government. The province of Habana begins in passive support, and the city of Havana begins in active support, as well as the province of Pinar del Rio. Next, we place 15 dark cubes that represent government troops and 15 light cubes that represent police into the blue available government force box on the board. And we place 2 blue discs into the numbered circles of the same box. We place 15 yellow octagonal cylinders representing guerrillas into the yellow available Directorio forces box. And we place 4 yellow discs into the numbered bases circles in the box. And we do the same for the red pieces, placing them in the available 26th of July forces box. And we do the same with the green pieces, placing them in the available syndicate forces box. In this game, the octagonal shaped pieces represent guerrillas, and the Directorio, M26, and the syndicate have guerrilla units. As to the government, M26, and the Directorio, the round discs represent bases, and as to the syndicate, they represent casinos. Now let's deploy the forces into the island of Cuba. From the available government forces box, we take 6 army cubes and 4 police cubes, and we place them in the city of Havana. These are the forces with which the government begins in the capital. In the city of Camagüey, we place 1 troop and 2 police cubes. And in Santiago de Cuba, 2 troops and 2 police cubes. And in the province of Las Villas, the government places 3 troop cubes. Now we place the forces for M26. In the province of La Habana, M26 begins with 1 guerrilla cylinder, and it is placed with its embossed side face down. If a guerrilla ever becomes active, the marker is flipped so that its embossed side shows. But at the beginning of the game, all guerrillas begin underground. In Sierra Maestra province, M26 begins with 2 guerrillas and a base. And in Santiago de Cuba, we place 1 M26 guerrilla. Now we place the forces of El Directorio. El Directorio begins in the city of Havana with 2 underground guerrilla cylinders. And they also start with another underground guerrilla cylinder in the province of Camagüey. And now we place the syndicate's forces. The syndicate begins the game with an embossed side-up or open casino in the city of Havana. And in the province of La Habana, a second open casino. Finally, in the nearby province of Pinar del Rio, the syndicate places its 3rd open casino. And in this game, we always take discs from the upper left and work right then down, so that the number showing is the number of bases that are placed on the map. In the case of the syndicate, you see that the syndicate has already in the map 3 casinos. Now we mark control. If any faction has more pieces in a city or province than all other factions, it controls the space, and we mark it with a corresponding control marker of that faction. So here we see that the city of Havana begins the game firmly in control of the government that has 10 units compared to 3 of all other factions. The city of Camagüey also begins under government control, as well as Santiago de Cuba. In the province of Las Villas, only the government has units. There's no units from any of the factions in Matanzas, so that province begins uncontrolled. And in the province of La Habana, the Syndicate and M26 each have 1 unit, so it is also uncontrolled. In Pinar del Rio, there's only 1 open casino, so we mark it with Syndicate control. Oriente has no units, so it is uncontrolled. But Camagüey has only 1 Directorio guerrilla, so it is under Directorio control. And finally, Sierra Maestra is firmly in control of M26. Now we have to set up the card deck for the game and also for the purpose of this extended example of play. The game includes 86 cards, and among those 86 cards, there are 4 propaganda cards. We start by taking 3 of them and placing them face down, and the remaining card, we set it aside for now. Next, we remove the cards that appeared listed on the bottom. And we place these cards to the side. Now we take the deck of cards and we shuffle the deck, and we deal 12 cards, which we place face down on top of each of the propaganda cards. Now we shuffle each of these stack of cards and we place them one on top of the other. And we create a single stack of cards. And we take the cards that were set aside, including the propaganda card, and we place them in the order that you see here below, from bottom to top, so that the topmost card in the deck will be El Che, and the bottom card will be Rebel Air Force, and we place this stack on top of the pile. And we're all set. Before we start with the gameplay portion of the extended example of play, let's talk about the cards and their role in the game. One thing that makes the coin series so unique is the role that the cards play in the game. Cards will be played from the deck created at the game start, but players do not maintain a hand of cards as in other card-driven games. Instead, cards are played from the top of the deck, and ordinarily, 2 cards are visible always to the players, the card being resolved, and the next card to be resolved, which is always placed on top of the draw pile face up. In other words, players in this game get to look 1 card into the future. We will begin the game now, and at times there will be comments made by the players, and we will mark those comments with an appropriate lettering with the color of the player's faction. So now, on to the game. We start by drawing the topmost card from the deck, and it is card number 13, El Che. And we place it face up, and we start a played card pile next to the deck, and then we reveal the top card on the deck and we leave it on top of the deck face up, and it is number 27, Echeverria. Each event card has 4 symbols across the top, 1 for each faction in the game, and the order of these symbols from left to right dictates which faction has initiative on that card. However, in order to be eligible to execute an operation or carry out the card's event, which appears listed below the title, a faction must have its eligibility cylinder in the eligible box of the sequence of play display. And eligible factions may either play or pass, and at this time all 4 factions, as you see, are eligible. To determine who gets to choose first, we look at the order of the eligibility symbols, and the faction with the leftmost symbol gets to choose what to do first and becomes the first eligible faction. And in the case of this card, El Che, the M26 player is the first eligible faction. Let's see what M26 can do. It may do one of 4 things. It may execute the card's event, or it may conduct a single type of operation without any supplemental special activity, or it may conduct a single type of operation with a single special activity, or it may pass. If the first eligible faction chooses to pass, it remains eligible to play on the next card. However, if it does anything other than pass, then it becomes ineligible to play on the next card. And the corollary of this is that a faction usually may only play on every other card. If the first eligible faction chooses to pass, then the faction whose symbol is to the immediate right of its symbol on the card being resolved becomes the first eligible faction. And in this case of El Che, if the M26 player passes, then the government would become the first eligible faction. However, here the M26 player decides to act, and let's get the game going and hear from the M26 player. An interesting card to start the game, a good starting card to immediately show the difficult choices that this game presents to the players. I am faced with the difficult choice of either taking a very good event, which will be beneficial to me for the entire game, or conducting operations. And I'm going to make the painful choice of passing up the event in order to conduct operations. I need to strike while the iron is hot, and I have the opportunity to terrorize Santiago and also La Habana right now. If I were to take the event, the government would then have the chance to sweep and activate those guerrillas, and the terror opportunity would be lost. So, M26 will be using the option it has as first eligible to execute operations and a special activity. It will execute a terror operation and a kidnapping special activity, so the red eligibility cylinder is moved to the op with special activity box. When a faction decides to execute operations, it gets to select one type of operation from a menu. So we take out one of the 4 copies of the faction foldout in the game, and we look at the side that says 26 July. Here we see the part of the foldout that deals with July 26, and we see that there's 2 columns, one insurgent operations and the other one special activities, and each has 8 text boxes. And this serves as a Chinese menu of operations and accompanying special activities. And at the box at the lower right, there's a summary of all the factions' victory objectives. In our game, M26 has decided to start with an operation and a special activity, and the operation selected is Terror, which appears in the bottom left box of the July 26 faction sheet. Operations can occur in multiple spaces in a single turn. You just have to pay for each space. And M26 will execute terror in La Habana province and in the city of Santiago de Cuba. As it appears in the terror box of the faction sheet, one resource must be paid per city or province where terror occurs. So we slide the M26 red resource cylinder on the edge track down 2 spaces from 10 to 8. Then an underground M26 guerrilla must go active in each terror space. So we flip the M26 guerrilla in La Habana province to its embossed side to show that it is now active, and we do the same with the guerrilla cylinder in Santiago de Cuba. Next, the terror box tells us to add a terror marker and shift support towards active opposition, so each of the 2 terror spaces receive a terror marker. And a terror marker can affect future efforts to shift opposition or support there. In this game, spaces with population show 1 of 5 levels of support for or opposition to the government, from active support to active opposition. This popular sympathy is key not only to government but also to M26 victory. And in our game, the terror shifts La Habana from passive support to neutral, and in Santiago from neutral to passive opposition, and we mark it accordingly. Because these shifts in popular sentiment affect victory, we need to keep track of them with the victory markers that we talked about previously and placed on the edge track. Blue total support, that is the measure of how well the government is doing, just took a hit of -1 in La Habana when it went from passive support to neutral. So we slide its marker 1 box down from 16 to 15. Similarly, in Santiago, we saw the change from neutral to passive opposition. So we increase the oppose plus basis marker from 7 to 8. The edge track has thresholds of victory reminders for the levels of victory needed by each of the factions. M26 needs to get the opposition plus basis marker above 15. These victory levels are also shown in the victory box of the faction foldout so that you can keep track of what you and everyone else is trying to do. So let's hear again directly from the M26 player. So it's terror in Santiago and in La Habana for a cost of 2 resources. This has hurt the government by removing support from La Habana and has helped my cause by adding opposition to Santiago. I will add a kidnap special activity in Habana. And I can do this without having to worry about the government taking an event which could hurt me. I have found that resources often become scarce for M26, so I need to take the opportunity to steal some from the syndicate. The purpose of the kidnap special activity is to take money from the syndicate or government, and its location can be an open casino space where a terror operation has been played and M26 guerrillas exceed police. And here in the province of La Habana, the terror operation has been played, there's an open casino, and the guerrillas exceed the number of police units. And the procedure is to transfer to M26 a die roll in resources or a cash marker from the syndicate if there's a casino. And in that case, the casino there will be closed. So we roll 1d6, and the roll is a 1. one resource from the syndicate goes to M26. So the syndicate now have resources at 14, and M26's resources are now at 9. If you glanced over at the kidnap box of the faction sheet to see what the July 26 player was just talking about, you're catching on fast. The terror box has a reminder in the upper right that this operation can be accompanied by a kidnap when M26 is executing operations and a special activity. The M26 player decided to kidnap in La Habana to take resources from the syndicate's casino there. And the kidnapping also closes the casino. So we flip the green disc embossed side down, which means closed. And we slide the open casinos marker one box down to 2. And that wraps up M26's move for this card. So we look back at the active card, El Che, and the sequence of play display on the game board. We see on the card that the government is next up, and it has its cylinder in the eligible box, and so it may now make a move. And as second eligible faction, you can see from the arrows in the sequence display that when the first eligible faction executes ops plus a special activity, as M26 did, the second eligible faction has a choice between the event or a limited operation. A limited operation is a normal operation, but in only one space and without any special activity. Often, having the option to play the event can be very powerful. Most events are dual use. They have an unshaded version and a shaded version, often benefiting opposing sides, so that there often is something to help you or hurt your enemies. Events in the unshaded portion of a card typically are favorable to the rebels, and events in the shaded portion are typically favorable to the government. Here we see a card that is currently not in play. The unshaded event is helpful for the Directorio, while the shaded event hurts the Directorio. Let's return to the card that is in play. In this particular case, the event El Che is unusual in that, as a benefit to M26 from Ernesto Che Guevara's talents as a revolutionary, no other faction really benefits at all from this event's effects. Let's now hear what the government player makes of this situation. M26 has left me with the option to take a limited op or pass. And if I pass, the next event card looks good for me. But I feel certain that the Directorio will use the event for himself, and I will not have the opportunity to take it. So I will take the limited op now. I could sweep in Havana and expose the Directorio guerrillas, but instead, I will place a base in Las Villas to strengthen my position for future turns. So, the government executes a limited operation to train in one space, Las Villas province. Training is the main way that the government builds its forces, and sometimes it can use it to build support too, by spending resources on something called civic action. In this case, the government used training to replace 2 of its troop units with a new base. Let's now mark that the government is taking a turn. We place the blue eligibility cylinder on the sequence of play into the second faction lim op or event box. And we take 2 dark blue cubes from Las Villas and we return them to the available government forces box. Now we take the left-handed blue disc from there and we place it at Las Villas. The exposed 1 in the disc space is a reminder that the government now has 1 base on the map. Unlike insurgent operations that generally cost only one resource per space, the government's counterinsurgent operations cost more. How much more depends on the United States backing via the U.S. alliance track. The marker there is in the firm box, showing that each ops space costs 2 resources. So now we slide the government resources cylinder on the edge track from the 15 box down to 13 in order to pay for that nice new base. Now, to finish up the play of the Elche card, we have a last bit of housekeeping to do. We need to mark the 2 factions who did something as ineligible to do anything on the next card. We slide the red and blue eligibility cylinders into the ineligible factions box to show that they just executed either an op or an event. Both the government and M26 players with good beginning moves. The M26 player is an excellent coin series player because he thinks not only about the move he will make, but also about what options he leaves his opponent. The government player decided to build a base in Las Villas before the insurgents can contest the area, and with the limited op available, the government player could only operate in a single area. The government could not perform a civic action in Las Villas, and this is an action used to build support, because there are no police there. But with the base now present, the government will be able to place police in Las Villas next time by way of a train operation. Okay, so let's move on to the next card and give the other players a chance. We place the Echevarria card over on top of Elche. Echevarria is the card that we will play now, and we flip over the next card on the deck to see what's coming up. And it will be Sinatra. As we can see in the Echevarria card, the Directorio is the first eligible faction. So let's see what the Directorio player has to say. At this point in the game, taking the event is a no-brainer. I get 2 more guerrillas on the map and go back to the eligible list for the next card. I'm hoping that the syndicate passes now for the event next card so that I get a full op plus a special activity. These guerrillas will hopefully turn into a base by my 3rd or 4th play, and this event also dings the government a bit, so I hope I will be able to reinforce my position in the east while the government deals with Havana and what the M26 player is doing. And this unshaded event reads that 2 Directorio guerrillas can be placed anywhere, Havana changes to neutral, and the Directorio will remain eligible. Per this event, Havana, which started with active support for the government, becomes neutral, and this costs the government 12 support points. That is 6 population times 2 for active support that the government had previously. So now total support from the government plummets from 15 all the way down to 3. And El Directorio places 2 guerrillas taken from their available Directorio forces box into the up to now vacant province of Oriente. Now the Directorio has control of Oriente with its population value of 2. And we slide the Directorio population plus bases marker from the number 1 box to the number 3 box. And note that the Directorio, which was the first eligible faction, chose to play the event. But because the event also includes that the Directorio remain eligible, its eligibility cylinder returns to the eligible factions box. The next faction indicated in the order of the card from left to right is the government, but the government is currently ineligible. So the next eligible faction is the Syndicate, and let's see what the Syndicate player has to say. A very tough choice here, as it probably isn't worth passing to take the Sinatra event, even though I would gain an open casino for free. The Sinatra event would allow the Syndicate to place an open casino in Havana regardless of stacking limitations, and also one cash marker with the police there. I have to be a little bit careful about helping the government too much, as any cash marker would let the government player sweep and assault in one area like Havana in a single turn. So I'll go ahead and play an ops and a special activity and hope to build casinos later. And the Syndicate executes the rally operation in 3 spaces. So we take 3 guerrilla cylinders from the Syndicate's available forces box, and we place one in the city of Havana, the second guerrilla in the province of La Habana, and the third guerrilla in Pinar del Rio. And the Syndicate will also conduct a profit special activity, which can be conducted in spaces with open casinos. And the procedure calls for placing one cash marker with any guerrilla or cube in each of the 1 or 2 selected spaces with an open casino. So we add cash markers to the guerrillas in Pinar del Rio and the city of Havana. And we took the cash markers from the cash box that is beneath the available Syndicate forces box. We see here that Pinar del Rio is in active support of the government, and it is a bit of a gangster haven at the moment because neither M26 nor El Directorio can rally in a space where there is active support for the government. But the Syndicate can. The Syndicate's rally operation took place in 3 spaces, so we reduced the Syndicate's resources from 14 to 11. 2 factions have taken their turn in this card, El Directorio and the Syndicate. Now we adjust eligibility. The government and July 26 become eligible again for the next card, so we slide their cylinders back over to eligible on the left, and because of the event, Directorio is also eligible, leaving only the Syndicate's green cylinder in the ineligible factions box. So now we place the Sinatra card on deck. It is the next card to be played, and we reveal the top card, and it is Rolando Mas Ferrer. And even though the Syndicate is the leftmost faction on the Sinatra card, it is ineligible. So the next faction to the right is the Directorio. So the Directorio becomes the first eligible faction once again. Here we see the events on the Sinatra card. The unshaded event subtracts 6 resources from the Syndicate, while the shaded event allows the Syndicate to place an open casino in Havana regardless of stacking, and 1 cash marker with police units there. Since the Syndicate played a second faction op and is not eligible, I'm not worried about these events firing, and I can take a full op plus a special activity. I think I want to spend the next couple of turns rallying, which should get a base on the board for me. Unfortunately, I don't have as many resources as the other players, so I feel the need to take advantage of the opportunity to subvert when I can. So the Directorio will conduct a rally operation plus a subvert special activity. The rally operation will be in 3 spaces, so the Directorio spends 3 resource points and its cylinder is now at 2. The rally action allows El Directorio to place in any neutral or passive provinces or cities 1 guerrilla, or replace 2 there with a base. So El Directorio we'll place 3 guerrillas. One in Oriente, another one in Camagüey, and the third guerrilla in Las Villas. El Directorio now conducts a subvert special activity. This can be done in any Directorio-controlled province, and the procedure is to add the selected province's population value to the Directorio's resources and set the space to neutral. The subvert special activity will take place in Oriente, and we remove the passive opposition marker, and populist support is now neutral. And now we add the province's population value to the Directorio's resources, and we move its resource cylinder to the number 4 box. The subvert special activity by El Directorio in Oriente dampened the local enthusiasm for the M26 by eliminating the passive opposition from the province, and now the province is neutral. So now we have to slide the opposition plus bases down 2 on the track from 8 to 6. And finally, we place the Directorio eligibility cylinder in the first faction op with special activity box in the sequence of play display. The government is up as second eligible, but decides to pass. So we slide the blue cylinder down into the pass area. And when the government passes, it earns 3 resources. So government resources are increased from 13 to 16. And because the government passed, now M26 becomes the second eligible faction. And it also decides to pass. And insurgents earn only 1 resource point when they pass. So we slide the red resource cylinder into the number 10 box. Now, why would both players decide to pass when they could have taken a move? Let's hear what the designer has to say. With Rolando Masferrer upcoming, the government passes, presumably to execute it, a powerful, lingering government momentum event. And with the expectation of the government taking the event, M26 passes to take advantage of the full operation and special activity that it would then receive. Now let's adjust the cylinders. The 2 eligible factions that passed become eligible, as well as the syndicate, and the Directorio, which executed an operation and a special activity, becomes ineligible. So now we move the Rolando Masferrer card to the played card pile, and it will be the next card to be played, and we reveal the top card, and it is a propaganda card. And in the Rolando Masferrer card, the government is the first eligible faction. Let's see what the government player has to say. The propaganda card always comes up within the first 13 cards, and the odds were not great that it would come up so soon. But such is my luck. The event Rolando Masferrer only lasts until the propaganda round, so there is no sense in taking it now. After the propaganda round, all factions are reset to eligible, so there is no sense in passing either. I need all the help I can get, so I will take the first faction op with a special activity. I need to get more forces on the board. If I sweep, it will have no effect because the guerrillas will go back underground in the propaganda round. So the best choice is train, and I can transport now as a special activity, and I will use it to move troops into Pinar del Rio so I can take control and skim some money from the syndicate. So now that we know what the government is already planning, here's what it does. the government will conduct a train operation, and in each selected city or government base, it can place up to 4 cubes. The government trains in the city of Havana, adding 4 police cubes there. The government also conducts a train operation in Las Villas and adds 4 troops there. And the government trains also in Santiago de Cuba, adding 1 troop and 3 police cubes there. The government has conducted operation in 3 spaces, and because the U.S. alliance track is at firm, each operation in each space will cost 2 resources for a total of 6. So we reduce government resources from 16 to 10. Now the government will conduct the transport special activity that allows it to move up to 3 troops from a city or base to any space. The government will transport 3 troop cubes that it has in the city of Havana to Pinar del Rio. And this switches the province from syndicate to government control. Now we slide the blue eligibility cylinder to the first faction ops with special activity box. The next faction shown on the card is the Directorio, but the Directorio is ineligible. So the next faction is M26, which is eligible. The government's special activity set up the possibility of skimming during the propaganda round. During the resource phase of the propaganda round, players must check to see if skimming occurs, and this happens for each space with an open casino. The syndicate transfers 2 resources to the controlling faction if it's any other than the syndicate. But the government's special activity has also set up the opportunity for me to take the event. And the event Brutal Commander would allow M26 to set a province with troops and one adjacent province to passive opposition. So the event will be executed and Pinar del Rio and the adjacent La Habana provinces will be set to passive opposition. And this increases the opposition plus basis score to 8. And total support for the government now drops from 3 to 1. Now we place the red eligibility cylinder in the second faction lim-op or event box. The government could have placed police in Las Villas with a train operation which would have enabled the government to do a civic action during the propaganda card. But perhaps the government decided that it had already enough to do with Havana at neutral and support crashing down to 1. The troops in Las Villas will make it difficult for either of the insurgent factions to take control there. And nice job by M26 to capitalize on the unshaded version of the event to pick up additional opposition at Pinar del Rio and La Habana province. So now we place the propaganda card on the played pile, and it will be the next card, and we reveal the top card of the deck. And it is Faure Chomon. Now we proceed to resolve the propaganda card. We pull out the sequence of play sheet and we will consult the bottom half, which summarizes the propaganda round. On the game board, we place the propaganda card marker into the first box on the propaganda round track, victory, and as we proceed we can move the marker along. The victory conditions are those that appear summarized in the faction sheet's lower right hand corner, and they are further detailed in the rules, and at this early stage none of the players are very close, as the various victory marker positions compared to the colored victory thresholds along the edge track show. So let's move on. Next is resources, and the government gets 8 resources for its unsabotaged economic centers. There's 3 economic center spaces on the board. These are these round spaces like the one that you see here representing the sugarcane industry, and this space provides 2 resources. And the mining economic resource produces 3 resources for the government. And the cigar economic center produces 3 resource points for the government, for a total of 8 for unsabotaged economic centers. And to this we add 15 resource points because of the level of aid. Economic centers plus foreign aid totals 23 resource points, which we add to the 10 on the track, and the government has a total of 33 resource points. M26 receives 1 resource point for its base at Sierra Maestra, and its resources are now at 11. Directorio receives 4 resource points because it has pieces in 4 different spaces. And we move its cylinder to the number 8 box. The syndicate gets 4 resources for 2 open casinos. However, the government then skims 2 of these resources from the syndicate for the open casino in Havana and another 2 resources for the open casino in Pinar del Rio, both spaces that the government controls. So this means that all profits from the casinos this time went to the government, increasing its total resources to 37. Fortunately for the syndicate, it had also piled up some profits in cash, 2 markers that it must now deposit, and it decides to do so for 6 resources each. Note that the markers could have been used to place new casinos instead, as there was stacking room in the spaces with cash. There's a maximum stacking of 2 casinos per space. So we increased the syndicate's resources from 11 to 23. So summing up, resources are 37 for the government, 23 for the syndicate, 11 for M26, and 8 for the Directorio. Now we check for support. We start with the U.S. alliance level. We check the U.S. alliance track. And if support is 18 or less, we shift down 1 box and drop aid by 10. Support is well below 18. It is at 1. So the U.S. alliance marker is now placed in the reluctance box. And now each operation in each space undertaken by the government will cost 3 resources. And now we have to reduce aid by 10 points. So aid is reduced from 15 to 5. Civic actions cost 4 resources per terror marker that is removed or per support level that is shifted. I can now raise the support in cities or provinces where I have both troops and police, like in Santiago de Cuba, as well as in the city of Havana and the city of Camagüey. And the cost is 4 resources for each terror marker, and then 4 for each increase towards active support. And it's important for the government to leave resources for the following turn. The government cannot do anything without money, and I will raise support in the major cities. The government buys a civic action in Havana, 2 levels, to active support. And in the city of Camagüey, 1 level to active support. The government conducted 3 civic actions, so its resources are now reduced from 37 to 25. Total support also increases. 12 points for Havana on account of the population of 6 times 2 for active support, plus 2 points for active support in Camagüey City. And we slide the total support marker from 1 to 14. We've checked for U.S. alliance, civic actions, and now we check for agitation in any space where M26 has control. If they spend 1 resource, they can remove terror there, and if there's no terror, shift 1 level towards active opposition. But the only space, Sierra Maestra, controlled by M26 is already at maximum or active opposition. So there will be no agitation there. Now we check for expat backing. The Directorio may conduct a free rally in 1 space that has neither active opposition or active support, nor is controlled by any faction other than the Directorio. The space could be uncontrolled. Let's see what the Directorio player has in mind. I was planning to rally soon to get a base in Oriente, so I will do that now. I would like to have more than 1 guerrilla in there to protect the base, but I will have to wait. The next event, Fauret Chomon, is also seemingly too good to pass up, and this may be a little risky, but we will see how it goes. So the Directorio conducts its free rally operation to add a base in Oriente, and for this, the op requires 2 guerrillas to be removed. Now the Directorio population plus bases is at 4. Now it's the turn for the government to redeploy. The government must move troops on economic centers or provinces that don't have government bases to government-controlled spaces that either are cities or have government bases. And it may also move other troops to such spaces and police to any economic center or government-controlled space. Now I have to redeploy troops that are not in cities or that are in spaces without bases. So everything in Pinar del Rio must go. And I will move some police to Las Villas so that I can use a civic action there in the future. So the 3 troops in Pinar del Rio move back to Havana. And 2 police cubes move to Las Villas, one from Havana and the other from Santiago de Cuba. In addition, the government chooses to redeploy 1 troop cube from Santiago to Camagüey City. Now to the last phase of the propaganda card, reset. And we slide all eligibility cylinders to the eligible box. And we remove all terror markers and at this time, if there would have been any government momentum event in effect, these are events that have a lingering effect, we would place the card in the discard pile to signify that such event is no longer in effect. We set all guerrillas to underground, so the M26 guerrilla in Santiago de Cuba is inverted, as well as the M26 guerrilla in the province of La Habana. Now all closed casinos are open, so we flip the casino marker in La Habana, showing its embossed side. Now the casino's open. We adjust the open casinos marker. Now it's at 3. We've concluded the propaganda round, so now we move the Fauret Chomon card to the played pile and we reveal the next card. And it's the 12. And the first eligible faction is the Directorio, and the students take to the field event allows the Directorio to place a base and 2 guerrillas in Las Villas. I'm taking the event even though this could set me up to become the victim of the 12. If it comes down to that, I'm willing to bribe the syndicate not to let the government have the option to play this event. Since it will be a long time before the next propaganda card, I'm looking to consolidate my position between Las Villas and Oriente. That's a total of 5 population, which is over half of what I need for victory. It seems like it's worth fighting for. So the Directorio takes the unshaded event and adds 2 guerrillas and a base at Las Villas. We move the Directorio cylinder to the first faction event box. M26 is up as second eligible faction. So it's Terror in La Habana, which activates the guerrilla there and also closes the syndicate's casino and changes opposition to active. And also Terror in Santiago de Cuba, which also activates the guerrilla there and increases opposition to active. For the terror operations in both spaces, we deduct 2 M26 resources. And together with the terror operation, M26 will conduct a kidnap special activity in La Habana, where there was an open casino, and will roll 1d6 and take that amount of resources from the syndicate. So we roll 1d6, and the roll is a 5. So syndicate resources are reduced to 18, which are transferred to M26, which now has 14. And we place M26 cylinder in the second faction op and special activity box. And that concludes play of the Faurechomon card, and now the Directorio and M26 are ineligible while the government and the syndicate remain eligible. And now, the next card to be played is the 12, and on deck is Turismo. The first 2 factions are M26 and Directorio respectively, but both are ineligible. So we move on to the syndicate as first eligible faction. I failed in negotiating a juicy enough deal with the Directorio, so since the government has offered to clear out the insurgents around my casinos, I will not worry about keeping the Directorio happy. I was hoping I could get the Directorio or the government to play the next event for me, but Turismo just isn't worth waiting on for 3 resources at the moment. Instead, I will expand my empire by building casinos in the city of Havana and Pinar del Rio and profit in both spaces. So the syndicate chooses the construct operation. This is an operation type that is exclusive to the syndicate. And in addition, it will perform a profit special activity. As you can see, the construct operation allows the syndicate to build new closed casinos at a cost of 5 resources per space selected, and they can select any city or province that is either controlled by the government or the syndicate. So the syndicate places 2 closed casinos, one in Pinar del Rio and the other in the city of Havana. Now the syndicate performs the profit special activity that allows it to place a cash marker with any guerrilla in each of the 1 or 2 selected spaces with an open casino. So we place a cash marker with the guerrilla in the city of Havana and the other cash marker with the guerrilla in Pinar del Rio. The syndicate spent 10 resources, that is 5 for each of the 2 new casinos that it placed on the board. So now its resources are down to 8. And with terror increasing opposition to active in Santiago de Cuba and La Habana, we increased the opposition plus bases marker for M26 to 10. The syndicate eligibility markers placed in the first faction ops with special activity box. Now the government is the second eligible faction. Looking ahead, the Turismo event is very nice for me, but also helps the syndicate, who appears to be doing well right now. The ugly American side actually hurts M26 as well as me, so I'm not too concerned about it being played against me. So I will play this turn, but because it cost a little more for me to get rid of guerrillas in the mountains, I will take the current shaded event to kill off 2 of the Directorio guerrillas in Las Villas. The event allows the government to remove half rounded up of the number of guerrillas in a particular space. So in Las Villas, we eliminate 2 of the 3 Directorio guerrillas. It's always nice when you can use events to do your work. And in this case, the government was able to threaten the Directorio without spending any resources. And this will force the Directorio to rally on its next turn. So that's the end of the actions with the 12. And now, Directorio and M26 are eligible while the government and the syndicate are ineligible. And now, Turismo is the next card to be played, and Ambassador Smith is on deck. The leftmost faction, the syndicate, is ineligible, as well as the next one, which is the government. So we move on to Directorio as the first eligible faction. With the loss of those guerrillas, I feel I should reinforce my position with more guerrillas. The government is going to run out of resources eventually, so I better make sure I am in a position to kill bases if necessary. Long term, I'm just trying to grow out the area that the Directorio influences. I feel like if I have a lot of targets where other players can knock me back, that I'll seem more or less of a threat, and losing a base here or control of a space there won't actually knock me back too much. So Directorio will rally in 4 provinces, and note that these provinces have to be neutral or passive, and it allows Directorio to place 1 guerrilla in the province, or if there's a base in the province, a number of guerrillas up to the population level plus bases. And El Directorio will rally in Matanzas, Las Villas, the province of Camagüey, as well as Oriente. In Matanzas, the Directorio doesn't have any base, so it places 1 guerrilla there. Directorio has a base in Las Villas, so it places 2 guerrillas for the Villas population level, plus 1 additional guerrilla for having a base there, for a total of 3 new guerrillas. In Camagüey, the Directorio places 1 new guerrilla. And finally, in Oriente, where the Directorio has a base, it places 3 guerrillas. The rally operation in these 4 provinces cost the Directorio 4 resource points. So its resources are now at 4. The Directorio now conducts a subvert special activity that allows it to earn resources equal to the population value of a province under its control. It will subvert in Oriente, adding the population level of 2 to its resources, and now they're at 6. And we place Directorio's eligibility cylinder in the first faction op and special activity box. Next faction in the Turismo card is M24 as second eligible. As the government player well pointed out, the ugly American event hurts me as well as the government. So I think I'll settle this time. for a limited operation. So I will rally in Pinar del Rio. A limited operation is an operation that is conducted only in one space, and M26 will rally and it will place one guerrilla in Pinar del Rio, which is a province that has no government support at all. Pinar del Rio is in passive opposition, so we place an M26 guerrilla there. The limited operation cost 1 resource point, so M26's resources is now at 13. And we're done with the Turismo card, so the government and the syndicate are now eligible while M26 and the Directorio are not. So, Ambassador Smith is the next card and Eulogio Cantillo is on deck. And the syndicate is the first eligible faction. The decision of whether to play ops or events is a pretty simple one here. If the government was in a position to win the game, I could block Ambassador Smith, since it will be very tough for the government to get an automatic win on the next propaganda card, because that would require not only more total support for the government, but also getting all 3 cities to active support, and Santiago de Cuba is in active opposition. I'm safe to use the card for ops and a special activity. Now, what combination to choose? I have some nice casino building options available in Camagüey or possibly Las Villas, but with my low resources, which are at 8, and also thanks to the July 26 kidnapping and my building binge, I can't be too ambitious. For my operation, I will march my guerrilla with its cash in the city of Havana to the relative safety of the province of La Habana. Note that I could also march the guerrilla with the other cash marker from Pinar del Rio to the province of La Habana for free, because the destination would already be paid for. But I prefer not to tempt other players too much by locating all my cash together in one province. So the syndicate marches its guerrilla and cash from the city of Havana to the province of La Habana. The syndicate will also conduct a bribe special activity in one province, which allows it to remove 2 enemy guerrillas at a cost of 3 resources. The M26 guerrilla in Pinar del Rio is bribed and removed. Syndicate resources drop from 8 to 7 for taking the march action, and for the bribe special activity, which is the only one in the game that costs resource points, syndicate resources are reduced to 4. That's the end of the syndicate's turn. Up next, as second eligible, is the government. I am very torn as to what to do in this situation. My primary goal is to sweep and assault all guerrillas in spaces where I am. But I would only have a limited op. The event shifts the US alliance from reluctant back to firm. And we increase aid by 9 points. So aid that is at 5 increases to 14. But this event also helps the syndicate, and now we add 9, or half of the level of aid, rounded down to the syndicate's resources. Aid is at 14, half is 7, which is less than 9. So we add 7 to the current resources of the syndicate. That increases resources to 11. Place the government's eligibility cylinder in the second faction limb, op, or event box. And that ends play of the Ambassador Smith card. And now we rearranged the eligibility cylinders, with M26 and Directorio now eligible, while the government and the syndicate are ineligible. And now, the next card to be played is Eulogio Cantillo. And on deck is General Strike. The government is not eligible to play, but M26 is. And this is the opportunity to maximize my forces. And M26 will rally in 7 spaces, and to do so, the provinces or cities cannot have support. And it will place 1 guerrilla in the province or city, or it can place guerrillas up to twice the population value plus twice the number of bases in the space. It will rally in Sierra Maestra, in Oriente, in the province of Camagüey, as well as Las Villas, Matanzas, the province of La Habana, and Pinar del Rio, and we ran out of White Pawns. Because there is a base in Sierra Maestra, M26 receives 2 guerrillas for the population value plus 2 for the base, for a total of 4 new guerrillas. In Oriente, where M26 does not have a base, they receive 1 guerrilla. And the same situation happens in Las Villas in the province of Camagüey, where M26 places 1 guerrilla in each province. And again, in Pinar del Rio, La Habana, and Matanzas, where M26 has no bases, 1 guerrilla is placed in each province. The rally operation in 7 spaces reduces M26's resources from 13 to 6. And M26 will conduct the Infiltrate Special Activity, which allows it to remove or replace 1 cube, starting with police cubes, in any space without support that is with or next to an underground M26 guerrilla. And M26 will infiltrate in Las Villas, where they have an underground guerrilla, so 1 police cube is removed and will be replaced with an M26 guerrilla cylinder. And we mark in the sequence of play that M26 conducted an op with a special activity. Next up is the syndicate, but the syndicate is ineligible, so it's the directorio. A limited op doesn't do much for me here. I think that the next shaded event will be tempting for the government to move the last city, which is Santiago de Cuba, from active opposition to active support. So I'm banking on getting a full op plus special activity next turn. So Directorio, which is the second eligible faction, passes and will receive an increase of 1 to its resources, which are now at 7. That ends play on the current card, so we adjust the eligibility cylinders. And now all factions except M26 are eligible. And the next card to be played is General Strike. And Vilma Espin is on deck. And first up is the government. It seems like a waste of time to take the shaded event, only to have M26 take the unshaded event in the next card and undo everything. But it's still the best play for me. So the government plays the shaded event, and the rebels' scheme for a general strike fails, and the attitude towards the government changes from active opposition to active support, and the sole guerrilla unit in Santiago is already activated. And also 1 casino that is closed can be opened. The government player confers with the syndicate, and they agree also to allow the closed casino in Pilar del Rio to be opened. Total support increased by 2, so now it is at 16. By the same token, opposition is reduced by 2, so we move the opposition plus basis marker to the 8 box. And with the casino opening at Pinar del Rio, open casinos is now at 3. And we mark the government's cylinder as the first faction taking the event. Next up is the Directorio, which remain eligible by passing in the last card. And the Directorio can take an operation and a special activity. I feel like M26 and the Syndicate are doing very well in this game. I'll beat down on M26 a bit this turn, so we don't see a lot of terror turning spaces into opposition. I can only remove opposition or support via special activities or terror, which won't help me win the game. So I'll attack in Camagüey, Oriente, Matanzas, and Las Villas using ambush in Matanzas. The purpose of attacking is to eliminate enemy forces, and it can be performed in any spaces with the faction's guerrillas and enemy units. And we activate all guerrillas, roll a die, and if the die roll is equal or less than the number of guerrillas, 2 enemy pieces are removed, with bases and casinos being removed last. And if we roll a 1, we place a guerrilla, and all cash markers are removed. And El Directorio will also conduct an ambush special activity, which can be combined with the attack, and its purpose is to ensure the attack's success, and it can be performed in any space that is being attacked with an underground Directorio guerrilla. The attack activates 1 underground guerrilla and automatically succeeds, and we place another Directorio guerrilla there. So Directorio will attack in Matanzas, Las Villas, the province of Camagüey, and Oriente. And it will use the ambush special activity in Matanzas, ensuring the attack's success there. So the M26 guerrilla in Matanzas is eliminated, and we add 1 Directorio guerrilla. Now in Las Villas, El Directorio rolls 1d6 and needs a 4 or less to eliminate both M26 guerrillas. But the roll is a 6, so the attack in Las Villas fails. Now to Camagüey, where the Directorio needs 3 or less to eliminate the M26 guerrilla there. And the roll again is a 6. Another failed attack. Now we resolve the attack in Oriente. 4 or less will kill the M26 guerrillas. And the roll is a 4, so both M26 guerrillas are eliminated. All of the Directorio's guerrillas that participated in attacks are flipped to their activated sides. Now for the 4 attacks of El Directorio, we reduce its resources from 7 to 3. We mark the Directorio's cylinder in the second faction ops and special activity box, and that concludes play on the General Strike card. And now we redistribute the cylinders for the next card, and now M26 and the Syndicate are eligible, while the government and the Directorio are ineligible. It's interesting that the Directorio chose to try to slow M26 down at this point. The danger, of course, is that the majority of Directorio guerrillas are now active, and the government can step in and mop things up in Las Villas. And now, Vilma Espín becomes the card to be played, and on deck is Rebel Air Force. And first eligible faction is M26. The Espín event presents an interesting choice for me. The unshaded event sets Sierra Maestra or an adjacent space to active opposition. Oriente would give me 2 more opposition points than Santiago and would temporarily prevent Directorio from building another base there. But if I leave Santiago at active support, the government will be within 3 points of winning, and could get there with a civic action in Las Villas if the government can gain control. I'm glad the Directorio failed in its attack in Las Villas, because success would have given the government control of that province. At least now it must fight for it. So I will change Santiago with the Vilma Espin event. So from active support, Santiago de Cuba goes into active opposition, and the terror marker there will make it expensive for the government to bring it back to active support. Total support is reduced to 14, while oppose plus bases is increased to 10. So we place the M26 cylinder in the first faction event box. The next eligible faction is the Syndicate. The Syndicate has some interesting options here. As the M26 player mentioned, the government was closing in on an automatic win. But M26 effectively ended that threat. Both El Directorio and M26 are now the biggest threats. M26 can add 4 more opposition points through terror, so I want to deny him access to my cash. Alternatively, I could make a deal with M26 to leave my casinos open in exchange for one of my cash markers. So what is the best play for the Syndicate here? Assuming we can't make a deal with Fidel, can we keep both markers out of danger? And what about the next card, Rebel Air Force? And that's where this extended example of play ends. So as you have been able to see, in Cuba Libre, each faction has a distinct set of goals to achieve victory and different tools with which to achieve it. There's really no allies here, as sometimes you will have to make short-term deals with your rivals. So, this is Cuba Libre, Volume 2 of the Coin Series, and I hope that this extended example of play video has given you a good idea of the flow of the game and what the game has to offer. This is Stuka Joe, signing off for now. Thanks for watching.